I used my innocence to save Xiao Jinhe's life. But he believed that I did it on purpose because I coveted the position of crown princess. Later, the enemy army besieged the city and demanded that the crown princess offer sacrifice before they would cease fighting. Xiao Jinhe smiled and nodded, saying, "Yes." He said I stole my sister's things and it was time to return them. He hung me on the city wall and left me to be pierced by thousands of arrows. He had 100 ways to turn defeat into victory, but he said that this outcome was all my own fault.
1.
I woke up from a nightmare. A group of people surrounded me with complicated expressions. The mother sat beside the couch, crying, while the father had a stern face and said nothing. I was in a daze for a moment. Wasn't I already dead? He raised his hand and slapped himself twice, and his face immediately felt burning with pain. My mother hurriedly pulled me back, and my father yelled, "You have no self-respect, and you know how to embarrass others." I was frightened by his scolding, and the severe pain in my body finally brought me back to reality. I lost my virginity. My memory opens, and I remember how Xiao Jinhe, who was poisoned by the flower, held me in his arms and took me away roughly. He called out my sister's nickname over and over again, but used me as his antidote.
2.
Xiao Jinhe came to visit me. It would be better to say that it was a visit or a test of opinion. He said that he would make the bastard who drugged him die miserably to avenge me. I leaned on the soft couch, looking at his jade-like eyebrows and eyes, and as I looked, tears fell. There was a hint of guilt in his eyes, and he picked up the handkerchief gently and wiped my tears. I could never imagine that the young man in front of me would be so cruel as to let me suffer the pain of being pierced by thousands of arrows a few years later. But in the dream, he was heartless, disgusted, and contemptuous of me. Every look, every word, is still clear in front of my eyes. I couldn't stop crying. Xiao Jinhe was a little impatient and frowned slightly. "I know you've been wronged. Don't worry. I've already asked for a reward for you. Think carefully about what you want." What he said is very interesting. He knew very well what kind of reward could make up for the injustice of a daughter who lost her innocence for him, but he was unwilling to give it. So he pushed the problem back to me. He would never have thought that I, who am usually so gentle and shy, would actually dare to ask the queen for permission to grant me marriage.
3.
Less than a cup of tea had passed since Xiao Jinhe came to my room when my elder sister came rushing over after hearing the news. During the days I was sick, she never looked at me. My elder sister dislikes me so openly that she dislikes me. But no one in the family blamed her because I had caused her to become homeless. According to my elder sister, she sneaked out of the house when she was 9 years old because I was craving for sweet soup, but my mother didn't allow me to, so I asked her to buy it for me. That's why she was kidnapped. But I don't like sweets at all. My father said, "What child doesn't like sweets?" My mother told me to be nicer to my sister. Everyone tacitly agreed that I owed my sister this life. I can feel that what I have is slipping away little by little. It started with a veil and a piece of clothing, then came the father's attention and the mother's favor. Until the young man who once said he would marry no one else, his eyes followed my sister, walking farther and farther away.
4.
When sister came, Xiao Jinhe was wiping my tears. She pulled him away and hit his chest with her fist. "Xiao Jinhe, don't you want me anymore?" She was very unruly, but Xiao Jinhe liked her. "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't you think your hand hurts?" He smiled and scolded her. His tone was full of tenderness. "I heard it all from my mother. She said that you and Luo Yufu, the two of you, the queen wants to promise her to you." She sobbed and sneered. She was usually a bright and cheerful person, but when she cried, she looked even more pitiful and lovable. Xiao Jinhe raised his index finger and pressed it on his lips, signaling his sister not to say anything. His eyes swept over me, and he spoke each word loudly. "Second Miss saved my life. I cannot thank you enough for your kindness. I will repay her well, but I can't give her more than that. No matter how much more, there is no such thing." In Xiao Jinhe's eyes, my innocence is not worth mentioning. His words were like a bucket of cold water, chilling me to the bone. I have known Xiao Jinhe for 6 years. All the favors he once gave me, all the moments when he once made my heart beat, at this moment, all became a joke of my self-conceit.
5.
After a few days of rest, the Queen Mother invited me to the palace for a talk. She hosted a banquet for me in the Imperial garden, prepared my favorite plum juice and snacks, and her words were full of love for me. I've long heard that the second daughter of the Luo Yushi family is aloof and eccentric. Now that I've seen her, I can see that she's really as good as her reputation has been. If I had a wonderful person like you as my daughter-in-law, I would burn incense and pray to the Buddha to thank him for his blessing. I heard from Jinhe that your birthday is coming soon. Is there anything you want? The atmosphere was really good. I drank 2 more glasses, and my cheeks turned red. I really want to use the alcohol to pray for future for me and Xiao Jinhe. My lady, I am so brave and would like to ask for marriage. Xiao Jinhe was sitting opposite me. He was holding the wine glass, and there was a hint of coldness between his eyebrows. If I force myself to marry him, will he really have the heart to let me end up with 1,000 arrows piercing my heart? In the dream, after I married him, my elder sister tried to commit suicide and caused a great disturbance in the city. The queen punished her and forced her to become a nun. However, Xiao Jinhe did not expect that he would disregard the law and break into the nunnery to take her back to the prince's mansion. He loved her, and he would love her even if it meant risking the whole world's disapproval. His life was going smoothly, and he never failed to get what he wanted. But what others handed to him was not as meaningful as what he had fought for with his own hands. His love for his sister became more and more brilliant after repeated polishing. That was more than just a love story, but also a highlight moment when he fought alone and fought against the wrath of thunder. She is his pearl, the record of his fearlessness. How could he let this pearl be covered in dust?
So, I must die.
Only when I die can a beautiful stand be freed up to display the story of how he risked his life for the woman he loved.
6.
The queen asked me with a smile which young man I liked. The name Xiao Jinhe was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't say it no matter what. Every moment in the dream was so real, as if I had experienced it myself. In fact, my love for him had almost disappeared during those years. Those who stay are just unwilling to accept it. Your Majesty, your servant. Before I finished speaking, there was a sudden commotion in the crowd, and the servants swarmed around the queen, and Xiao Jinhe had to protect them. An arrow flew straight towards me, with a sharp cold light on the tip. In a trance, I saw countless arrows flying towards me, and thousands of arrows piercing my heart. The fear of death swept through my body. I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Xiao Jinhe. Please, I don't want to die. The arrow thumped into the table in front of me. I came to my senses suddenly and realized what a ridiculous thing I had shouted. Fortunately, there was so much commotion at the scene that no one noticed my misbehavior. Someone pulled me up by my arms. Why don't you dodge? There was a hint of anger in Xiao Jinhe's words. I lowered my head and didn't dare to look at him. A lot of words were stuck in my throat, but I didn't dare to speak. I was afraid that I would burst into tears, and I didn't want to lose face. Someone came riding a horse at full speed, and Xiao Jinhe angrily shouted, "Wan Yanshu, you are becoming more and more unruly. Even if I don't follow the rules, what can your highness do to me?" The man's voice echoed above my head, heavy, indifferent, unrestrained, and rude. I only saw a bony hand pulling out the arrow from the table, and my whole body began to tremble involuntarily. The man on horseback smiled softly. He was laughing at me, laughing at my cowardice. Wan Yanshu, he is Wan Yanshu. It was he who led the iron hooves to trample on our country. It was he who wanted me to sacrifice my life in battle and shot me through the heart with thousands of arrows. Because in a dream, I blinded one of his eyes.
7.
The Oji kingdom in the north has grown in power in recent years and has clashed with our army time and again, causing damage to both sides. To maintain peace, the two countries exchanged hostages and agreed not to invade each other's borders. Wan Yanshu is the unlucky proton. Although he is unlucky, He has been in Kyoto for more than 3 months, and his life is getting better and better. He was extremely sinister. When he came, he brought 3 maids with him. Each one was more charming and beautiful than the other. They were stuffed into the harem that day, in an obvious attempt to confuse the emperor's mind. Although the emperor was not stupid, he was still happy to give Wan Yanshu the greatest convenience when faced with beauty. I have never seen a proton so arrogant. Not to mention riding a horse in the palace. If not for an audience with the emperor, he could also carry a bow and arrow, which made him even more glorious than Xiao Jinhe, the crown prince. But in fact, the whole court openly criticized his cynical character, but secretly said, "People say that the Wanyan clan is calm and wise, but when you really see him, you'll find that he is a useless person who does not know his place and is not worth worrying about." Even I don't believe that a man like Wan Yanshu would kill his brother and father in a few years and become a serious threat to our dynasty. But I've seen that possibility, and I'm really afraid of him. He is a monster who grew up among beasts. He is just a lustful and cruel war dealer.
8.
I almost ran away from the banquet. Regardless of whether the dream is true or false, I must eliminate any chance of having anything to do with Wan Yanshu. I didn't care about my manners and trotted around the palace with my skirt lifted. I don't know why Xiao Jinhe caught up with me. I shook his hand off and screamed like a frightened bird. "Don't touch me." He was stunned for a moment, then frowned and asked me, "You have always been well behaved, but now you are out of control. Is it because of the Wanyan technique?" He is indeed sharp. I didn't want to say more, so I just asked him, "Your Highness, is there something you want to talk to me about?" Perhaps the impatience in my tone was too obvious. Xiao Jinhe's face turned cold. "I just want to ask the second young lady, whose marriage you are seeking just now." It turns out that he was here to criticize me. "No matter who it is, it has nothing to do with your Highness. I know your Highness' heart is not with me, and I have no intention of repaying my kindness." He put his hands behind his back, a hint of surprise flashing across his eyes. For so many years, I, a reserved person, was the only one who was passionate and frank with him. Everyone in Beijing knew how much I loved him. So, he must not believe that I let go so gracefully. I simply told him, the young master of Minister Chen's family is a very gentle and unrestrained person. In fact, I think that if he doesn't care that I have lost my perfect body, then please give him a leisurely job and let him take me to Jiangnan. If he cares, it's not a big deal for me not to get married in this life. Xiao Jinhe's brows moved slightly, and he stammered through his thin lips. But he couldn't utter a word. He just stared at me without blinking, as if he wanted to see through me.
9.
Chen Huaiyu likes me, just like I like Xiao Jinhe, in a silent but grand way. For as many years as I've been chasing after Xiao Jinhe, he has been chasing after me for as many years. After the beginning of spring, the number of pleasure boats on Jinming Lake gradually increased. Chen Huaiyu sent me another invitation, inviting me to go boating on the lake. He makes an appointment with me every year, and I always decline. But this time, I want to meet him. Unfortunately, when I arrived, I ran into Sister and Xiao Jinhe at the pier. She smiled sweetly at Xiao Jinhe, but when she saw me, her face immediately fell and she turned around and urged Xiao Jinhe to get on the boat quickly. Normally, given his status, he shouldn't have joined the people in the fun at this time, but my sister loved to have fun, so he would often break the rules and sneak out of the palace to play with her. Xiao Jinhe boarded the pleasure boat, lifted the curtain, and escorted my sister into the cabin. He paused, turned around and asked me, Are you alone?" Judging from his tone and expression, I misunderstood that he wanted to invite me to travel with him. Does he feel guilty towards me? Hypocritically. I suddenly became very annoyed, turned my head, looked at Chen Huaiyu in the crowd and replied, "I have an appointment." Chen Huaiyu came over with a basket of green apricots. I wondered what he was going to do when he asked me to wait for him, but it turned out that he knew I was craving for some small fruits. He had met Xiao Jinhe and was neither humble nor arrogant, possessing the character of a scholar. Then she handed me a yellow apricot and said with a smile, "It's washed. Try it and see if it's sweet." How can I put it about him? He has been pursuing me for many years, and we finally meet, but he never makes me feel that he is trying too hard to please me. He is as leisurely as a gust of wind. He has his own pace, and will not be easily disrupted by anyone. I reached out to take the apricot, and was about to take a bite when my sister suddenly said, "You just can't change your greedy habit. Who else do you want to hurt because of a bite of food? Don't you reflect on yourself and feel guilty?" She has been complaining about it all these years, and everyone knows that I got her lost. But most people say that it's not my fault after all. I was still young at that time. Seeing that I was not drowned by the spit, my sister felt a little resentful, so every now and then, she would find an opportunity to ridicule me. In the past, I could only endure. My father told me to endure, my mother told me to endure, and even I thought that as long as I endured, my sister would eventually get over this hurdle. But thinking back to her actions in the dream, fanning the flames, framing and slandering me, I kept tolerating it, but she only got worse. How can I bear it any longer? Sister, do you mean that I should sew my mouth shut and starve to death to atone for my sins? This was the first time I bumped into her. The noise in the cabin stopped for a moment, and then I heard my sister sobbing and calling out in grievance, "Xiao Jinhe, come in." His eyes wandered between me and Chen Huaiyu for a moment, then he lifted the curtain and entered the inner cabin.
10.
Today, I wanted to have a frank chat with Chen Huaiyu during our outing, but my mood was ruined by my sister. I was in a bad mood and kept silent all the way, but he did not disturb me. He took out a volume of miscellaneous notes and leaned back in the cabin to read with great interest. Occasionally, he would look up at me, peel a fruit for me, or pour me a cup of tea. I was mad at myself, and he was reading his book without even saying a word to comfort me. What a weirdo. But his silence made me feel very comfortable. I felt a little sorry for Chen Huaiyu and suppressed the anger in my heart. I waved my handkerchief at the mandarin ducks on the lake, and he followed me out of the cabin to see the scenery. I heard that he loved to make friends through poetry, so I cleared my throat and recited a poem. The fisherman sobered up and wrote again. The gills flew away, but turned back. Chen Huaiyu bit his lip and said nothing. He turned his back, and I saw his shoulders shaking. He must be laughing at me. How rude. I was a little annoyed. What are you laughing at? He couldn't hide his smile and waved his hand to apologize to me. Ms. Luo is very talented and her lyrics are good, but those two are not mandarin ducks, they are wild ducks. I blushed with embarrassment and laughed awkwardly. When he saw me like this, he smiled even more. When I saw him like that, I couldn't help but burst out laughing too. The boatman was probably just looking at us and laughing, so the boat tilted and collided with another boat. Our boat was small and the railings were low, and I was nearly thrown into the lake by the sudden collision. Fortunately, the people on the bow of the opposite boat helped me up. I steadied myself and tried to pull away to say thank you, but the man held my arm tightly and wouldn't let go. I looked up and saw it was Wan Yanshu again. He was crouching at the bow of his magnificent pleasure boat, with my eye level almost with his. He looked at me quietly, as if gazing up from the abyss. It was a very hot day, but I was so frightened that I broke out in a cold sweat. "You have a beautiful smile. What's your name?" I kept silent, and his expression visibly turned colder. Chen Huaiyu stepped forward to help me out. He bowed to Wan Yanshu and said, "Thank you for your help, Your Highness. The boatman was stupid and disturbed Your Highness. I hope Your Highness will forgive me." Wan Yanshu just glanced at him lightly, and then his gaze returned to me again. "Is it a beautiful mute?" He suddenly grabbed my chin and forced me to open my mouth to him. He squinted his eyes and smiled. "If you are dumb, it would be a waste of this beautiful tongue. Otherwise, pull it off and give it to me." My scalp was tingling, and I forced myself to calm down. Chen Huaiyu pulled me back and let me hide behind him. Wan Yanshu was so arrogant and domineering that even the princes and nobles had to give him some respect. I didn't expect Chen Huaiyu to be so courageous. But he didn't know that the person in front of him was a robber with no humanity in disguise. We must not annoy Wan Yanshu, and we must not implicate Chen Huaiyu. "Your Highness, I am the second young lady of the Yushir mansion. Luo Yufu. I bowed respectfully to Wan Yanshu. His murderous look finally moved away from Chen Huaiyu. You were the girl I scared when I was riding in the Imperial garden last time, right? I nodded. He suddenly stretched out his hand in front of me and said, "Come here, I will apologize to you." Apologize? How dare I ask him to apologize? I just want to stay away from him. But I have no say in this matter. Chen Huaiyu frowned, and I tugged at his sleeve, signaling him not to stand up for me. I suppressed my trembling and reached out to Wan Yanshu. He took my arm and pulled it gently, and I took advantage of the force to leap to his side. 11. I stood at the bow of the boat all the way, thinking that if anything happened, I would immediately jump into the lake to escape. Wan Yanshu seemed to see through my thoughts, and his tone was slightly unhappy. I just like wielding swords and guns. Is that enough to scare you so much? I quickly shook my head and knelt down in front of him. I am a coward by nature, and I have displeased His Highness. I will give you a gift as compensation. Cowardly. He smiled lightly, a smile on his face. I saw you were not a coward when you were drunk with the Queen, and you were not a coward when you were reciting some bullshit poetry with Chen Huaiyu and laughing so hard. Why are you a coward when you see me?
Huh.
This. I asked him a question that was confusing. I can't tell him that you liked me in my dream, but I didn't like you, and I accidentally hurt your eye, and you were so angry that you chased me for several years, and finally pierced my heart with 1,000 arrows? Wan Yanshu is a mad dog who will never give up until death. My palms were sweating, the midday sun was making me dizzy, and the pair of jewel-encrusted boots in front of me disappeared from my sight. An umbrella was thrown at my feet, and Wan Yanshu told me coldly, "Hold it up." He turned back, bow in hand. I thought he wanted me to shield myself from the sun, so I put the umbrella over my shoulders. But he pulled the umbrella brim down, blocking my view forward. He drew his bow and narrowed his eyes grimly. "Aren't you afraid of this thing?" As he spoke, he fired a cold arrow. I heard a commotion, and it was my sister's scream. Throwing away the umbrella, he saw Xiao Jinhe's guards holding swords and protecting him a few feet away. A broken arrow was floating on the lake. Wan Yanshu went too far by repeatedly challenging the Imperial power. He glanced at me, picked up the umbrella, and held it up for me. No wolf would allow others to invade its territory, especially when they are eyeing its woman. I frowned, but he didn't give me a chance to speak. He continued, "I know you're not my woman yet, but I'm pursuing you. Now is our time alone, and I don't like being disturbed." Xiao Jinhe's boat turned around, and Wan Yanshu curled his lips and sneered. An unlucky thing. He turned his eyes slightly, looked back, and said, "Look at that one. He has some brains." I followed his line of sight and saw Chen Huaiyu's boat parked under the weeping willows. He was sitting at the bow with a book in his hand. Although I couldn't see his expression clearly, I thought he was concerned about my safety. I was slightly distracted until Wan Yanshu's cold voice rang in my ears. "If you want to see him, you might as well sail closer. But I'm not sure whether the boat or the arrow will arrive first." I came back to my senses suddenly and met a pair of sharp, smiling eyes.
12.
In my dream, Wan Yanshu was like this too, telling me directly that he liked me. He said he liked my soft lips, thin waist, and the swaying steps I took when I walked. His love was superficial and on the surface, so it was easy for him to kill me. I can only play along with him, just to avoid offending him, and wait until he gets tired of me, and then he'll let me go. Or if I leave the capital and head south, he, a hostage, cannot follow me. No matter how well the emperor treats him, he will not let him leave his sight. Then I will have passed the test of Wan Yanshu. A few days later, Xiao Jinhe showed up at my house and said that the queen had invited me to the palace again. The sister was dressed in gorgeous clothes. When she came, she glared at me and warned me, "Don't talk nonsense when you see the queen. Some people are not yours. You can't ask for them." Then she shook Xiao Jinhe's sleeve and said coquettishly, "Where are we going to play today?" She was even worried that I would marry Xiao Jinhe. I smiled but said nothing. I watched him withdraw his arm and said to my elder sister, "I can't accompany you today. Mother asked me to go with you." You stay at home and wait for the lychees to be brought into the palace in 2 days. I will bring some out, and we will go to White Horse Mountain to enjoy them." My sister immediately brightened up, glanced at me as if showing off, and nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. If Luo Yufu is delusional and asks for something that she shouldn't ask for, you must not agree to it. She discussed this with Xiao Jinhe. Poor sister doesn't know yet that Xiao Jinhe sent me a letter earlier, telling me not to get angry with him and entrust the rest of my life to a mediocre person like Chen Huaiyu. He said he was willing to allow me to be his concubine, and there was a sense of charity between the lines, as if I should kneel at his feet out of gratitude. I guess he couldn't adapt because I suddenly stopped revolving around him, so he turned around and stuffed a date into my hand, wanting me to continue holding him and let him enjoy the satisfaction of being loved unconditionally. I was blind before and always thought he was bright and beautiful. But after the big dream, I can see a lot more clearly. Xiao Jinhe is a complete vulgar person, greedy, vain, selfish, and hypocritical. He always wants to find opportunities to prove that everyone and everything are under his control, both for my sister and for me. 13. The queen said, "In the past few days, Jean, he has mentioned to me that your daughter is shy and that I must be the one to discuss matters of marriage. He is right, and it was my negligence." I glanced at Xiao Jinhe, but he had a stern face and didn't look at me. "You and Jean, he have known each other for many years. He is outgoing and you are quiet and reserved. You are a perfect match. Now that things have come to this, if you don't mind him, you two can become a perfect couple. What do you think?" The queen was humble in words, but very proud on the outside. She must have thought that I would accept the order with many thanks. So when I said that I had someone in my heart and didn't want to let the prince down, the expressions on the faces of both mother and son were so wonderful. I refused clearly, but 2 days later, the imperial decree of marriage still fell on me. My parents sent my father-in-law out of the house. I stood there holding the imperial edict, my hands and feet cold. My sister reached out and pushed me, and I came back to my senses with a slap from her. "You bastard. You have no shame. You want to snatch everything from me." My face was burning with pain, so I threw the imperial edict on the ground and raised my hand to slap her back with all my strength. The elder sister covered her face, and after being shocked, she rushed up like a madman. I raised my foot and kicked her to the ground. In fact, every time I was bullied by her, I would run back to the house and hit the sandbags. It was better than nothing. When it came to fighting, I was much better than her, a fool. "Are you crazy, Luo Yufu? How dare you hit me?" Just then Xiao Jinhe turned around and saw the scene. He quickly helped the sister up and held her in his arms to comfort her. "Xiao Jinhe, you promised me you wouldn't marry her. You promised me." The elder sister hit his chest and cried. "She is a scumbag with ulterior motives. How come she happened to pass by when you were drugged? Everything was arranged by her. She is shameless. She is not worthy of being the crown princess. She has so many tricks up her sleeve." Xiao Jinhe paused and looked at me. I said, "It was the same in my dream." He clearly felt guilty towards me for a while at first, but why did his eyes become increasingly cold and disgusted when he looked at me later? It turns out that someone was whispering in his ear. Whether it is a lie or the truth, if you hear it enough, it becomes true. I pulled her out of Xiao Jinhe's arms and slapped her twice. "Listen to me. Luo Yuzhen, if you dare to slander me again, I will tear your mouth to pieces. I have tolerated you for a long time for the sake of my parents. I tolerate you not because I am afraid of you. I don't owe you anything." I threw the imperial edict into Xiao Jinhe's arms. How did this marriage come about? Didn't I explain it clearly enough? He took my hand, stuffed the imperial edict back to me, and said coldly, "Hold this thing carefully. If you don't hold it well, it will be fatal." I really don't understand why he would accept a marriage that he was not willing to enter into. All I knew was that I could never marry him. I couldn't let the bad things in my dream have any chance of happening. 14. I locked myself in my room for 5 or 6 days, carefully thinking about how to remedy the situation. After much thought, Only one thing that came to me in my dream is worth pondering. About half a year after Xiao Jinhe and I got married, Zhou Lurong from Grand Tutor Zhou's family raped a woman and beat her parents and grandmother to death. The Zhou family is the queen's mother's family. At that time, I was already the crown princess. When the matter was brought to my father's attention, he was worried that a thorough investigation would implicate me, so he had no choice but to smooth over the matter. Later, those idiots in the queen's family, relying on my father's supervisory authority, would come to him every few days to clean up their messes. Perhaps we can try it from the Zhou family. While I am still here, if I can find out something that can cause them serious damage, I might be able to bring down the queen and Xiao Jinhe. His Majesty has long been wary of his in-laws. It would be most appropriate for my father to investigate the case, do some meritorious service, and then ask for a cancellation of the engagement on my behalf. During dinner, I wanted to discuss something with my father, but as soon as my sister saw me, she immediately started to get upset again. "Father, if Luo Yufu marries Xiao Jinhe, our daughter will die." She smashed the porcelain bowl and held it around her slender neck. This is a trick that Ajay often uses. She cries, makes a fuss, and then tries to commit suicide if she is not satisfied with something. As expected, my mother panicked, and when she was about to rush over, my father threw the chopsticks on the table. "Go ahead and die. You were ignorant when you were little, and you are still ignorant when you grow up. If you get tired of living, no one will stop you." The two sisters don't act like sisters. They don't know how to help each other, and they fight with each other every day. My sister was obviously frightened by him. She could only sit on the ground with her hands folded and cry. My father was determined to cure her temper and shouted, "If you don't want to die, go to the ancestral temple and kneel down to worship your ancestors. Let them see what kind of people you two are." He suddenly turned around and scolded me. "You go too." From childhood to adulthood, whenever Luo Yuzhen got into trouble, I would suffer with her. I knelt before my ancestors and listened to Luo Yuzhen cursing under her breath. She stared at me with hatred and sneered. "Do you think the queen wants you to be her daughter-in-law because she likes you? She likes daddy's power." I adjusted my hair and looked at her with a smile. Yes, but even though I rejected the marriage proposal, she still didn't want me to be her daughter-in-law. She wanted me to marry her anyway. Well, I feel quite honored when I think about it. My elder sister had been living abroad before, so for the sake of reputation, it was impossible for the queen to let her marry into the prince's mansion. In addition, I was gentle and easy to control in the past, so I became a top-notch candidate in the queen's mind. My sister was so angry that she scolded me for a long time. Suddenly, she rushed over, grabbed my collar, and whispered in my ear, "Why are you so arrogant, Luo Yufu? Do you think you can have an easy life just by marrying into the prince's mansion? Your good mother-in-law, the queen, is not someone you can easily mess with. How do you think you lost your virginity? She was the one who planned it. In order to stop me and Xiao Jinhe, she made up a reason why she had to marry you. Do you still feel honored now?" I turned my head suddenly and stared at her sinister smile. Yes, Xiao Jinhe is the prince. How could someone be so bold as to poison him? How could he have no one to serve him? And how could I go to look for him? Who can secretly manipulate the right time, right place, and right people? I pretended to be calm and sneered. "Why? Did the queen tell you this herself? Do you expect me to believe you?" She left me, sat on the mat, stared at the ground with a wry smile, and murmured absent-mindedly, "Believe it or not, I have my own way to know." I know she's telling the truth. My nails have dug into my palms, and hatred is gradually eroding my sanity. It turns out that the reason I have suffered so much in my life is because I have become a tool for others to fight for power and profit. 15. My father probably saw that I wanted to refuse the marriage proposal, and he stopped me from saying anything before I even opened my mouth. "You have always admired the prince. Now that you have got what you wanted, don't be ungrateful and embarrass me and make things difficult for me." He didn't even ask me if I had any grievances. Forget it. At worst, I'll risk my life to fight them. I have suffered such a great humiliation. Even if I cannot let them pay back in full, I will fight to the death. Master Zhou pretends to be a gentle and kind person, but he actually raises a beast who rapes women and commits crimes. Well, I will bring this up earlier so that he can see clearly what it means to have a sword hanging over your head due to lust. I disguised myself and went to Yanji Pavilion. Two girls surrounded me and greeted me with a smile. They were not overly flattering, but every word they said was sweet. This was one of the best brothels in the capital, and the experience was truly extraordinary. I'm looking for someone who has a say among you. A girl waved her fan and said in embarrassment, "Young master, you are looking for our mother? Mother doesn't usually see guests. If you have something important to say, why don't I help you pass on the message?" I took out a gold ingot and put it on the table, spending most of my pocket money with it. But the girl just smiled and shook her head. "Sir, we don't allow people to break the rules for money here. The rules are really strict." I bowed to her and said, "Then please tell her that I am here to redeem someone." Redeeming a person? The girl seemed to have heard something new. "Sir, you don't know that our Yanji Pavilion is not like other places. Girls are not allowed to leave before they are 3-5. This, I really didn't know. This is the first time I heard that there are such ridiculous rules in the buildings of the brothels. Won't those who can't get the person they want cause trouble? I picked up the gold ingots on the table and put them back into my sleeve pocket in a sly manner. The girls around me laughed at me secretly, probably because they had never seen someone as stingy as me. How could I take back the money I spent? Well, laugh, you don't know my pain. What kind of bumpkin comes here to act so impressive? As soon as I turned around, a glass of wine was poured on my face. Zhou Lurong looked at me with his hands folded. "You talk to the girls, and you want to leave without leaving anything behind?" There was a crowd of people around him, and I actually saw Chen Huaiyu at the very edge. He seemed not to recognize me. He stood quietly aside with a smile on his face, as tall and straight as a poplar tree. I felt an indescribable awkwardness in my heart. It turned out that someone as noble as him was no different from any other man. I was distracted for a moment, and Zhou Lurong thought I didn't give him face, so he punched me in the chest, and the pain made me cough several times. "You poor devil. You dare to compete with me? I'll let you know how powerful I am." He raised his foot to kick me, but suddenly fell to the ground holding his leg. "What are you yelling about? Are you calling King Yan?" Wan Yanshu was on the second floor, wearing a purple shirt, staring down arrogantly. When the young masters saw that it was him, they all held their breath and dared not fart. I lowered my head, but he threw peanuts at me. "Hey, shorty, come up. How come I can see him everywhere? I'm not stupid. How could I just obey and go upstairs to die?" I ran away as soon as I could. Anyway, I had disguised myself, so if Wan Yanshu wanted to hold a grudge against me, he could do so. 16. After running desperately for 3 blocks, I went into an alley to catch my breath. Before I could catch my breath, I heard Wan Yanshu's eerie voice appear behind me. "Why stop? The rabbit is running for its life. If it runs too slowly, it will die." I shuddered, and before I could get up, Wan Yanshu grabbed the back of my neck and pressed me against the wall. "Luo Yufu, you are so naughty. You are so afraid of me that I feel it would be unfair to you if I don't cut off your arms and legs." I quickly said I wouldn't dare to do that next time. He lifted me up and spun me around, forcing me into a corner. Reaching out to pull my beard away, he sneered, "With your limited skills, you still want to hide the truth. What are you doing at Rouge Pavilion? Tell me who you want to redeem." My scalp was tense, and I said perfunctorily, "It's just for fun." "Oh, Qiuhua." My pupils shrank slightly. How did he know? Qiuhua is Zhou Lurong's sweetheart. I planned to redeem her and then set a trap for Zhou Lurong to commit. Wan Yanshu said coldly, "I heard that the queen has arranged a marriage between you and her precious son." He didn't need my answer. "You didn't want to get married, but you couldn't disobey the order, so you took the risk and wanted to cause trouble for the queen. If we want to start with the queen's maternal family, the first choice is Zhou Lurong, who has many loopholes. To deal with a gangster, we naturally have to use women as an excuse." My forehead was throbbing. He was so accurate in what he said. I didn't want to lie to him and annoy him. Your Highness, you know things like a god. Wan Yanshu patted the dirt off my face and sneered. You are so ugly, Qiuhua. I will redeem you. Rouge Pavilion has its own rules. I dare not cause trouble for your Highness. Rules? He didn't care and said casually, What do your rules have to do with me? Yes, the people of Daki abide by the rules of Daki in order to get promoted, make money and avoid disasters, but as a hostage, as long as the Emperor does not want to conflict with the enemy, and as long as he plays his cards harmlessly, no one can do anything to him. But I don't want to get involved with him too much, and I don't want to owe him anything. The same goes for Zhou Lurong's matter. I can find another way to deal with it. Forget it. I don't want to trouble your Highness with such a small matter. Wan Yanshu narrowed his eyes, and my voice was dimmed by his fierce gaze. Go on. Go on. He stared at me with raised eyebrows. I lowered my voice spinelessly. Then, thank you for your help, your Highness. You're afraid of the wrong person. Wan Yanshu let me go and said something I couldn't understand. Stay away from Chen Huaiyu, or he'll eat you till there is nothing left and you won't even have time to cry. But he said with a hint of amusement, Luo Yufu smiles beautifully, and when she cries, it's also worth watching. 17. Ajai's house arrest lasted until her birthday. Her parents felt that they owed her, so they held a grand birthday party for her and invited all the prominent figures in the city. Many talented people came to congratulate, including Chen Huaiyu. He stood alone on the corridor, playing with sparrows leisurely. Occasionally, a colleague would come to talk to him, but he would listen more than speak. How could such a pure and noble person associate with Zhou Lurong? Wan Yanshu said that Chen Huaiyu would eat me up till nothing was left, but I have no grudge against him, so why would he target me? Besides, Chen Huaiyu has never sent me a visiting card since the Imperial decree granted me the marriage. He behaves very politely, and it seems that he is concerned about my reputation and is intentionally distancing himself from me. If I really want to talk about who has evil intentions towards me, it's Wan Yanshu. He really can't point to anyone else. He should look at himself first. He has a frown on his face and looks like he wants to kill me several times. Today, Mother wanted my elder sister to look around more and see if there was any young man she liked. She didn't say anything, but just sat dejectedly in the crowd. It wasn't until Xiao Jinhe appeared that her eyes lit up. But he just said happy birthday to her and turned towards me. He took out a box from his pocket and handed it to me, saying with a smile, I found a pair of jade hairpins a few days ago, and they are just right for you two sisters, one for each of you. Now that I am the legitimate future crown princess, Xiao Jinhe naturally can no longer show excessive favoritism to my elder sister, as he did in the past. The light in my sister's eyes dimmed a little bit. I didn't feel happy at all, but rather a little sad. Even in a dream, when I die and he has removed all the obstacles between him and my sister, who can tell what will become of my sister in the end? Xiao Jinhe was not trying to show his affection to me. He just did it for others to see so as to avoid being branded as someone who loves to read but is not dedicated. He also knew that his role as the crown prince was like walking on thin ice. The emperor was always watching him, and he could not make any mistakes. I remembered that in my dream, Xiao Jinhe bravely broke into the nunnery because the emperor was in poor health at that time and could no longer take care of us. Oh, this sinister villain with evil ambitions. I feel disgusted when I take his things. Your Highness, this pair of hairpins is given to me and my elder sister. Does it represent a Huang and vying? Xiao Jinhe pretends to be affectionate, but I want to skin him alive. He narrowed his eyes, suppressed his anger, opened the box in his hand, took out the jade hairpin and personally inserted it into my hair. If you don't like this style, I'll find you something else. He is really good at playing dumb. At this time in the past, the elder sister would have rushed over to tease him, but today she was unusually quiet, staring somewhere absent-mindedly. I followed her line of sight and saw only an empty corner of the wall. At night, when I was about to lie down, my mother came to find me. She was sitting at the table, wiping her tears. Afyu, Just return the jade hairpin that the prince gave you to Ajin as compensation for your elder sister's years of wandering away. She is so upset about this that she is crying so hard that her eyes are almost blind. It really hurts for her to see this. The knife that my mother cut into my heart was always soft. She not only felt guilty towards my elder sister, but my elder sister was sweet-talking and lively, always able to make her happy, which made me look dull and boring, and even my kind words didn't sound so nice. I know that she loves my elder sister the most. I don't blame them for being biased, because human nature is biased. I just don't want to bear the blame that I shouldn't bear. Mother, I know you love my sister, but I don't owe her anything. You are my mother, you know whether I like sweet food or not, whether I am the kind of person who likes to provoke others. If you love my sister, just love her openly. I don't blame you, my daughter. I only blame myself for not being likable enough. I just don't want to hear you guys trying to pin the blame for my sister's disappearance on me. This doesn't change the fact that you were irresponsible as parents. I have shouldered this heavy sin for many years, but I can no longer bear it, Mother. After tonight, I don't want to hear anyone ask me to make amends for my sister. I don't owe her anything. I put on my clothes and found the broken hairpin from the bottom of my dressing gown. Just looking at it makes me feel uncomfortable. I haven't figured out how to deal with it yet, so I'll use this as an excuse to get rid of it. My mother's crying stopped abruptly. She was angry and speechless. I ignored her and took the things to my sister's yard. 18. There is a long-abandoned courtyard in the southeast corner of my house. My sister slipped in, and I followed her secretly, sticking to the wall and hearing who she was talking to. Sir, looking at the current situation, the crown prince must marry Luo Yufu. When she mentioned Xiao Jinhe, her tone was cold, without even a hint of lovesickness in her. Only by killing her can Jinhe take her place. It was like a wake-up call to me. My sister wanted to kill me? After a moment of silence, a man said slowly, Luo Yufu, keep it for now. The elder sister choked up and said, Master, you can't bear to part with her? The man answered irrelevantly, Can you kill Lord Yusher's daughter at will? Jinhe, I didn't expect that I spent 10 years teaching her to be a fool with no brains. Sir, is it that Jinhe is just an empty-headed person, or is it that you have some selfish motives? Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted coldly by the person opposite her. Jinhe, you seem to talk too much today. I heard my sister kneeling on the ground, her tone full of reluctance. Sir, what's so good about Luo Yufu? Tell Jinhe can do better than her.
Shanar Lux?
Jane, I don't need a piece of trash that talks a lot about love. I was sweating profusely as I listened outside the wall. Who is this man? Who is this woman? My sister was missing for only 5 years, but he raised her for 10 years. The Luo Yuzhen who lives in my house now is probably a fake. What is she doing at my house? Is her target Xiao Jinhe? It is not difficult to understand. Perhaps Xiao Jinhe, who is always looking down on others, showed kindness to me from the beginning because it was the queen's instruction. She needs my father's power to supervise all officials, and Xiao Jinhe is destined to marry the daughter of the Luo family. But what's the point of her wanting the position of crown princess? I never dreamed that I would be living in dire straits. I was completely focused on breaking off the engagement, but someone wanted to kill me right now, so I had to use my brains and strike first. When the elder sister returned home that year, the birthmark on her body and her childhood memories all matched. Even the longevity lock she had specially made was exactly the same one. My heart suddenly tightened. My sister, my dear sister, is she no longer in this world? As for the matter of the raccoon replacing the prince, I can only digest it by myself until I find evidence. I began to pay attention to Jinhe's every move. I was still young when my elder sister passed away, so my memory of her is not very clear. I just remember that she did have a hot-tempered temper and was indeed picky. The reason why I am so picky about food is that I am weak and cannot eat many things. Once I put them in my mouth, I will get rashes all over my body and they will be itchy and painful. I remember that Jinhe's diet was the same as my elder sister's. It was really hard for her to pretend to be so strict. I was so worried that I almost hit my head against the wall. Wan Yanshu rode by on a tall horse and tapped my forehead with his fingertips. He blamed me. You should just walk properly instead of thinking about other things. Today, the eldest princess hosted the party and invited noblemen and women from the capital to enjoy wine and admire the moon. I got off the carriage in the street in front of the princess's mansion and ran into Wan Yanshu after walking a few steps. He stood tall and looked down at me, which, against the haziness of the night, made him look less aggressive and more kind. Behind him sat a beauty, her peach-colored skirt hanging over the horse's back, making her particularly eye-catching. In the distance, Zhou Lurong hurriedly shouted angrily, "Qiu Hua, Qiu Hua. I've offended such a sticky person for you. I'll prepare a thank you gift and come to get it from you later." Without waiting for my reply, he sneered and kicked the horse's belly lightly. The horse's hooves clattered forward and leaped into the princess's palace. Wan Yanshu teased Zhou Lurong like he was teasing a dog, making him run after a horse with his head staggering. I felt like sitting on pins and needles throughout the whole banquet and couldn't help but look at Wan Yanshu. He lay in Qiu Hua's arms, drinking a glass of wine, looking exactly like a foolish and dissolute playboy. I have a terrible headache. Even if I asked him to redeem the Qiu painting for me, I had already made arrangements for the rest, and he didn't need to risk his life to become Zhou Lurong's living target. But the more I didn't want to get involved with him, the more he wanted to get involved in my affairs, and our relationship became increasingly inseparable. Zhou Lurong's eyes were sinister, as if he was ready to pounce and break Wan Yanshu's head at any time. Xiao Jinhe would naturally not let him go on a rampage, so he gave him a few cold warnings, and Zhou Lurong had no choice but to leave in anger. 19. After 3 rounds of drinks, Chen Huaiyu was suddenly pushed in front of the eldest princess seat. Zhou Lurong smiled as if presenting a treasure. "Your Highness is in high spirits today. I will find you something fun. My friend is a great ventriloquist with the moon shining. Why not let him perform a piece?" The eldest princess and the emperor have a deep sibling relationship. In Daki, everyone has to flatter her. Even the queen is no exception. She glanced at Chen Huaiyu lazily and snorted. "You are just a fool, and you dare to brag about yourself? Go away and stop making trouble." Zhou Lurong smiled even more widely and sat at her feet, pretending to be a filial son and a good grandson. "Your Highness has seen the world, and you are always kind. Please give him a chance to guide him and show him some kindness." Chen Huaiyu stood aside neither arrogantly nor humbly. His eyes met mine, and he just smiled as if it had nothing to do with him. Zhou Lurong winked at him, and he raised his sleeve to cover his mouth. When he spoke, his skill shocked everyone. When he imitates the calls of birds, you can hear the colorful falling petals on a sunny day in spring. When he imitates the chirping of cicadas, you can hear the sparkling waters of fish swimming in the shallow beaches. Tonight, with him here, even the taste of the wine is 3 times more enjoyable. He spoke in dialect and told a comedy, which made the princess laugh out loud. My heart sank. Although the accent was different, the voice was clearly that of the person who had spoken to Jinner that night. Chen Huaiyu hit it too well, and it gave me chills. He was smiling at me, but in my eyes, this smile no longer had the feeling of the breeze and bright moon. His smile was full of hypocrisy and cunning. He pretended to be a peaceful person, but he actually made moves in my Luo mansion, deceiving everyone and deceiving my father who had experienced many battles. He spent all day hanging out with Zhou Lurong, and it didn't seem like they were really serious about their relationship. She arranged for Jinner to try to marry Xiao Jinhe, and she was lurking beside Zhou Lurong. Who was he working for? I was in a state of deep confusion, and this was not something I could resolve on my own. I have to capture Jinner quickly and leave the rest to my father.
20.
Zhou Lurong went to the rouge shop to speak, but was blocked and speechless. Are the nobles of Daki also going to be like those barbarians, robbing and plundering without observing etiquette? He has been criticized by several elders recently, and his junior Xiao Jinhe has also advised him to be careful with his words and actions. He is very angry. Just add more firewood. Rumors spread overnight. It is said that the young master of Zhou family was defeated as a hostage by the enemy country, and his beloved was taken away, but he dared not say a word. He was thought to be such a powerful person, but it turns out that he is a coward who only dares to bully the people of Daki. If the two countries go to war, this coward will be the first to kneel down. With an ugly face, I sat opposite Sihai Pavilion, and my sight just happened to see Zhou Lurong's box. He was so angry that he smashed several cups. The waiter knelt on the ground to clean up the mess. Chen Huaiyu whispered something in his ear, and he slowly calmed down. After a while, a note came from Sihai Pavilion, summer hunting and shooting. I stood up in a rage. I had not expected that Chen Huaiyu would be so bold. He was planning to instigate Zhou Lurong to kill Wan Yanshu. If Wan Yanshu died, it would give the Wan Yan clan an excuse to start a war, as those people who grew up on horseback loved to plunder. On the other hand, our government is lacking in talent, our generals are old, and there is a lack of successors. We have been living off our old capital for more than a decade. If His Majesty wants to avoid conflict, I'm afraid he will have to sacrifice a few heads. The first to be hit was Zhou Lurong, but how could he be compared to the enemy prince? If necessary, Xiao Jinhe might have to be sacrificed. I have no doubt about this. His Majesty has many princes. If Xiao Jinhe is missing, there are still Xiao Jinshu, Xiao Jinlan, and others. There must be someone to inherit the throne. If it really comes to that, perhaps he can earn a reputation for being a man who sacrifices his own family for the sake of justice and has a broad mind. Chen Huaiyu is cruel enough. I guess that he would try to trick Zhou Lurong into making a mistake, but I didn't expect him to go to such a big extent. He is gambling with the lives of people all over the world. How dare he kill Wan Yanshu? I remembered that he had just glanced at me inadvertently, and even though he didn't know me, he still nodded to me in such a polite manner. There was a calmness and ease in his expression, without any trace of utilitarianism. His unhurried manner perfectly concealed all his darkness. He used the most nonchalant tone to play with the fate of the people of the world on the tip of his tongue. This person is truly horrible. I almost ran all the way, and when I saw Wan Yanshu, my heart almost jumped out of my mouth. Xia, xia, xia. He pinched my lips and waited until I caught my breath before letting go and saying, "Speak now." I swallowed 2 cups of tea, and my throat hurt every time I spoke a word. It's the summer hunting party. Be careful. Zhou Lurong might want to kill you. He frowned. Is this why you're so anxious? I nodded frantically. Of course. If Wan Yanshu was careless and died, I would not have to marry Xiao Jinhe, but I would have become a sinner of Daki. I cannot joke with the lives of people all over the world. Wan Yanshu seemed to have misunderstood what I meant. His eyes suddenly became very soft, like ripples on the lake caused by wind, which made me feel a little embarrassed. I'll be careful for you. He suddenly raised his bow and shot an arrow that hit the bull's eye. As for me, if someone wants to kill me, he'd better kill me. Otherwise, I'll just have to wait for me to recover and come back to kill him. His sinister eyes remind me of his ruthless face in my dreams. The pain and fear of being pierced by thousands of arrows make my heart palpitate every time I think of it. No matter who hurts your highness, will you be like this? Even if it was unintentional. I shuddered. Wan Yanshu thought about it seriously and then answered me. You, except you. He put a coat on me and said, or maybe you can tell me why you are afraid of me, so I can correct it. I forced myself to put on an extremely ugly smile, shook my head, and said nothing. It was all a dream. I can't say that. 21. Tributes from the western regions were delivered to the palace. I heard that this year's tribute included draconian fruits, so Xiao Jinhe invited me to go to Bema Mountain to enjoy them. I pushed Jinhe out directly. Sister has been having a hard time eating or drinking lately. Your Highness should spend more time with her. Dragon dandelion fruit is a rare treasure. Sister always likes new and novel things. Maybe it will make her happy. He was silent for a moment, then sneered. Luo Yufu, are you planning to compete with me for the rest of your life? Forgive me for being blunt, but your Highness is not worthy of my life. Luo Yufu, You are so shameless. With no one around, his true nature finally showed up. Have you forgotten how you threw yourself into my arms? Now you're playing the game of being aloof. Be careful not to mess yourself up. Let's see how you will kneel before me and beg for mercy in the future. I'm too lazy to argue with him. If you ignore this kind of person, it will make him feel worse than stabbing him with a knife. Jenner came home before dinner, and I deliberately brought up the issue of tributes going to the capital at the dinner table. I heard that the galangal fruit only grows once every 10 years on a tree. No wonder I have never seen your majesty enjoy it since I tasted one when I was a child. I wonder if you will have the pleasure to taste it this time. Jeune Heir answered. Today, His Highness invited me to go to the mountains to escape the heat. He brought a basket of lovely fruits, which he called dragon dandelions. They are sour and sweet and very delicious. My parents' expression suddenly changed, and I curled my lips slightly. My sister can't eat dragonite. I still remember the bite she took when she was a kid. It nearly cost her her life. I don't know how Jenner found out about my elder sister's food allergies, but since the dragon dandelion was a gift, my father was afraid of offending the emperor, so he didn't tell anyone about my elder sister's allergy. After all, it is a treasure that you won't see many times in your lifetime, so you just need to be more careful with it. Jenner, you're showing your true colors. My parents were about to call a doctor, but I stopped them. It's been a whole day. If she was going to feel sick, she would have felt sick a long time ago. Isn't she fine now? Jenner's face flashed with panic, but she reacted quickly and said, Don't worry, Dad and Mom. Maybe it's because I didn't have much to eat and drink during the time I was away from home, so my body is a little stronger than before. The corners of my mother's mouth trembled slightly, and she was about to cry when this was mentioned. My father also sighed, and his guilt was evident on his face. I suddenly wanted to know, when they find out that the girl I have loved with all my heart for these few years is not their own flesh and blood, will they feel that I have been wronged? Will they love me as much as they love this fake girl? I hid my tears and stared at Jenner with a smile. Why is it that sister's health is so unstable? She feels sick until midnight after eating almond cream, but gets better immediately after eating dragonberries, which she rarely eats. Have you forgotten that year when you took a bite of dragonberries and had to lie down for half a month? You threw away all the dragonberries in the house after you got up. She said resentfully, Of course I didn't forget. How could I forget? I wanted to give it a try today, so I took a quick taste and then ate a few more bites when I saw nothing was wrong. Luo Yufu, what on earth do you mean by talking about all this? I don't mean anything. I just want to ask you, are you Luo Yujin from the Luo mansion or a fake one? The emperor only gave my father 2 fruits, and my sister and I each got 1. How could there be any extra fruits for her to throw away? My father became suspicious. Jenner pretended to be stupid and hid in her mother's arms, saying that she didn't understand what nonsense I was talking about. I told them everything that happened that night. My parents were dumbfounded, and their eyes kept shifting between me and my sister. If you don't believe me, then I'll do it myself and we'll know for sure by dropping blood on the paternity certificate. Jeune Heir grabbed her mother's sleeve and cried, No, I don't want it. Dad, I am your flesh and blood. How can you not recognize me? Luo Yufu, you must die to be happy, right? Her mother also hugged her and cried. She was fine all along. How could it be fake? Grandpa, don't do it again. Didn't we do it the day we found Ajun? If you hurt her like this again, how will she live in the future? Woman's kindness. My father has been an official for many years. How could he not know how serious what I just said is? Who on earth had inserted this woman into my Luo mansion? What was her purpose in going to such great lengths to marry Xiao Jinhe? Such a detailed plot is definitely not unusual, and when it involves the royal family, it cannot be taken lightly. My father personally poured a bowl of water, pricked his finger, and then watched the 2 drops of blood in the bowl, each rising and falling. 22. I heard that Wan Yanshu was shot by an arrow at the summer hunting meeting. Zhou Lurong's good friend Chen Huaiyu wrote to the emperor, revealing the fact that Zhou Lurong hated Wan Yanshu because of a prostitute. Long Yan was furious, and took advantage of this opportunity to pile up reports like snowflakes in study, which detailed how the queen protected her mother's family and raised such an ignorant fool. The queen acted quickly. Before His Majesty could speak, she strangled Zhou Lurong and cut off his head to send it to the Wan Yan tribe to appease her anger. This woman is so cruel. She swiftly saved Xiao Jinhe's precarious position as crown prince. However, before everything was calm, a wave of rumors suddenly spread in the capital, saying that Crown Prince Xiao Jinhe was unworthy of the position and had raped Luo Yufu, the daughter of Yu Shi. I will never forget the humiliation that my grandmothers endured when they were ordered by the emperor to verify my identity. I lay on the couch, silently digesting my emotions. Xiao Jinhe came to beg me to go to the palace and explained to the emperor that he and I were in love with each other and couldn't help but taste the forbidden fruit. Your Highness, do you remember what you once said? To ask for help, you have to kneel down at someone's feet and wag your tail to beg for mercy. Without even thinking, he fell to his knees. Ashiki, please help me this time, because we are childhood friends. He really has no shame at all. Even if I didn't do what I dreamed about, considering all the things he had done to hurt me because of Jinner, how could he dare to come to me for help? Forget it. Now that he has begged for it, I will just give it a try. When I met Your Majesty, I didn't say a word, I just cried. Xiao Jinhe kept urging me. Afu, quickly explain to father, quickly tell him. I cannot say much about this matter. If I am not careful, it will arouse Your Majesty's suspicion. I wonder why my father knew about it but did not report it. Could it be that he wanted to form a clique with the queen to pursue personal interests and just took advantage of the situation? I cried at first, and the more Xiao Jinhe urged me, the more I shrank. He yelled at me, and then apologized gently. The emperor saw all my mood swings. Then he suddenly said, His Highness told me not to make it public otherwise. You're talking nonsense. Xiao Jinhe roared, but the emperor had lost his patience and waved his hand to have him dragged away. Deposed and imprisoned, this was his fate. Compared to a quick death, the collapse of power would torment him day and night. 23. Xiao Jinhe's wails were still ringing in my ears when the eunuch came to tell me that my father had something important to report. I waited in front of the palace gate until late at night, when I saw my father dragging his tired body out. He has visibly aged a lot lately. My father went to the palace to sue the third prince for disrupting the government in order to seize the throne and taking advantage of court officials, which was a big taboo. Chen Huaiyu is the third prince's man, and so is Jinner. From the day we discovered that Jinner was a fake, the third prince had to be brought down. But my father wanted to collect more evidence before making any plans, but my mother secretly let Jinner go. The most important witness is gone. The third prince will surely take quick action after receiving the news and kill our Luo family. My father had to strike first before the third prince made any move. Fortunately, I had mentioned Chen Huaiyu to him before, so my father started with him and collected a small amount of evidence. My father worked so hard for many years, even knocking his head against the wall in study, that he finally persuaded Your Majesty to investigate the matter thoroughly. Afu, don't blame your mother. She just misses your sister too much. I bit my fingers. My throat was so sore that I couldn't speak. But mother, you have more than one daughter. Are you willing to sacrifice the lives of your entire family for a fake? Mother, you are really confused.
My sister is dead.
Jinner said so herself. Because Chen Huaiyu is ruthless, in order to test her physical condition, he made her eat things that she was not allowed to eat. My sister ate it until the second year, and then passed away. 2 months later, the third prince was banished to the frontier and was not allowed to return to the capital without an imperial edict. All his accomplices were arrested and brought to justice, awaiting execution. Chen Huaiyu asked someone to bring me a letter, which was like a revolving lantern before his death, and he talked to me a lot. He said that his mother was raped and killed by Master Zhou, but his father was so cowardly and incompetent that he didn't even dare to say a word. He said he had always liked me and he was jealous that Xiao Jinhe could get my wholehearted love. All his life he longed for power, longed to avenge his mother, and longed to be able to ask someone to propose to me in a grand manner. But now it is impossible. He said he was sorry to me, and that all the suffering I had endured was caused by him. He said I was his goddess, but he wanted to pull me down from the altar in an attempt to get closer to me. In fact, if he had listened to Jenner and planned to get rid of me earlier, he might have obtained the power he wanted by now. I burned the letter. In the dimming light of the fire, I just sighed that living a stable life is really a luxury. 24. My mother's condition was getting worse. Whenever she saw me, she would throw me around and call me a Death Star, causing chaos in the family. She wanted me to return her precious child to her. My father wanted to send her back to her uncle's house in Suzhou, but I stopped him. Why don't I go? Beijing is a terrible place for me. After the Ramadan, I bid farewell to my parents. Sitting in the carriage, I saw the corner of my mother's clothes hidden behind the door. I wondered if she was crying or if she was reluctant to leave. But she is sick and the doctor said I should stay away from her. After this trip, I don't know what year it will be when I return to Beijing. Outside my carriage, I could hear the sound of horse hooves. After a while, someone opened the curtain and started arguing with me. Have you ever thought that I would come after you? Are you reluctant to lift up this rag and take a look? Wan Yanshu now looks much more comfortable with his frowning brows and raised eyes than before. During this year, I watched my mother indulge in her own fantasies and figured out a lot of things. People, after all, have to look at the road under their feet. After deliberately ignoring his worries, he came into contact with Wan Yanshu again and found that he was not that scary. He looks like a wolf, but once he swears allegiance, he will put away his fangs and claws, and occasionally he will roll on the ground to amuse me. How did you get here? Don't make a fuss. Leaving the capital without permission is a serious crime. I lowered my voice, and Wan Yanshu rolled his eyes at me, ignoring me. Your Majesty has approved it. How did you do it? I asked him while leaning against the window frame. Is this difficult? I always find a way to get what I want. He's a bit of a show-off. Have you found a place to stay? I was thinking in my mind, if he proposed to stay at my house, how should I explain it to my uncle? I live in the Sewell Hall. He looked teasing, as if he was joking that I was thinking too much. I'm not used to living in ordinary places.
And he also mocked me.
But it's true that his litter of wolf cubs needs a bright place to be raised. Suyu Tang is a well-known paradise. Your Majesty once stayed here during his southern tour, and when he returned to the palace, he copied the original and built a fake Suyu Tang. I was secretly delighted. Then I'll come and play with you when I have time. Wan Yanshu was very smart and sneered. Just tell me you are here to eat, drink, and take advantage of Jinger, and I will still think highly of you. Don't forget to hand in your visiting card when you come. Write it carefully. If you try to be perfunctory, I won't open the door. It has been a long and arduous journey, but suddenly, it doesn't seem so hard anymore. Extra. Chen Huaiyu. On the day my mother hanged herself, I went to the residence of Grand Tutor Zhou, holding her embroidered shoes to seek justice, and 2 of my ribs were broken. Those evil slaves used me as a tool to vent their anger, punching, kicking, and spitting at me. I thought I was dead, but a lost little girl came in and was scared and started crying, but she only cried twice and then the group of people let me go. Don't cry, Miss Luo. If you cry and hurt your voice, we will punish you. From that day on, I knew that power was important, and I also knew that the second daughter of the Luo Yushur family was a crybaby. Luo Yufu loved to cry and would often hide away to cry secretly. Her elder sister was a shrewd girl who was always getting into trouble and always put the blame on her. I hate that girl because she made the girl I like cry. The first time I did something bad was when I planned to kidnap Luo Yuzhen. Luo Yufu cried for a long time because of this, and I felt very sad, but I thought that after crying for a while, her life would be much better in the future. The girl I like should be spoiled by her parents and not shed tears endlessly. So I have no regrets. The first time I felt jealous was because there was a beautiful girl named Xiao Jinhe by Luo Yufu's side. He is very skilled in arousing the passion of young girls. He is so distant and hot and cold that the girl I like cries for him and laughs for him. Her place beside me was meant to be mine, and I would never let her shed tears. I arranged for Jin'er to enter the Luo mansion and easily discovered Xiao Jinhe's disgusting nature of liking novelty and hating old things. Luo Yufu cried again, and I felt very sad, but I thought that after crying for a while, she would not easily give her true heart to others in the future. So I have no regrets. Jin'er and Xiao Jinhe get along well, but the queen dislikes her and thinks her temper is difficult to control, and she wants Luo Yufu to be the crown princess. I planned with her to make it a done deal between Xiao Jinhe and Luo Yufu, but in fact, it was Jin'er who was having the affair with Xiao Jinhe that day. This was the first time she disobeyed my order. The girl I like is crying again. I feel so sad, and I feel so sorry for her. I want to tell her that it doesn't matter, as long as it's you, the rest is not important. But I am indeed a despicable person. In the dark corners, I also have secret joys. She is too perfect. Now that she has fallen from the altar, do I deserve her? I was in a very contradictory situation. On the one hand, I wondered if I had done something wrong, but on the other hand, I was thinking that I was doing this for her own good. Being a coward, I put all the blame on Jin'er. When she said she loved me and didn't want to commit herself to Xiao Jinhe, I just felt that this face that looked like Luo Yufu was annoying. I persuaded myself to keep her for now, and when the matter was accomplished, I would cut her into pieces to avenge my father. But later, when I was about to succeed, I suffered retribution. It was fate that my Fu saved my life, but also sent me to prison with his own hands. I owe her that. She did the right thing. I wrote her a letter, introducing my sloppy life in a long and wordy way, but in fact, what I really wanted to say was only 4 words at the end of the letter. I want to see you. I want to see you, Luo Yufu. She didn't come, as I expected, but I don't regret it. Mother, Huaiyu has avenged you. Those who have bullied you, directly or indirectly, are all dead. Mother, please wait a moment. Huaiyu will be with you soon. Huaiyu still wants to hear you sing. Good little rabbit. Good you, brother? Perfect facial technique. When I arrived at Daki, the old man told me that if I couldn't get the city defense map of Daki, I should kill the woman who gave birth to me. Haha, I grew up in a wolf's den. My father is an old wolf, and I grew up drinking wolf's milk. What does his affairs, her affairs, have to do with me? The first thing I did on the day I arrived in Daki was to chop down the envoy who had escorted me with my sword. When I was a kid, he kicked me in the stomach and stepped on my face. I had to let him know how vindictive I was. I was lawless in Daki, and the old man was almost mad to death. He no longer mentioned the city defense map and only told me not to go too far because his troops were not fully trained yet. I don't care about him. This damn place, Daki, is so boring. I miss the grassland and the wolves. My teeth are itchy, the kind of itchy feeling that comes from lack of flesh and blood. I need prey to soothe my restless blood. So, I met Luo Yufu. There are millions of people in Daki, but none of them is like her. She gets scared and trembles when she sees me. She was like a frightened white rabbit, trembling in a very beautiful way. I thought it was quite interesting. This kind of cowardly kid is just right to be used as a prey. Luo Yufu is my toy. When I am annoyed, I stretch out my claws to tease her. The more scared she is, the more I want to bully her. Fine. It's really good. Until I caught her smiling at Chen Huaiyu. She was laughing so hard that her whole body was shaking. She looked at Chen Huaiyu with a sparkling light in her eyes. I stared at her and him and felt depressed. I had never seen her look like that before, and an emotion overwhelmed my reason. When I came to my senses, I realized that I had done something I would never do in my life, which was to steal a woman from someone else. She stood beside me, but her eyes were on another man. If I were like that, I should have thrown her into the lake. But when I get angry, I just keep it to myself. I didn't know what happened to me. I stayed at home for 3 days and couldn't sleep or eat well. I have been thinking about Luo Yufu, and this time, I am not thinking about how to scare her. She was laughing in my mind, laughing and laughing, but this smile was not for me. I was angry and sad, and my heart ached, as if she had dug a piece out of it. I talked to the totem, and I felt like I was sick. It patted me with its tail, then ran to lie down next to its wife, and licked her fur, licked her fur, licked her fur. Luo Yufu is not someone I can chase after just by being a bootlicker. I won't be a bootlicker either. I have a bad temper and cannot bring myself to lick her, so the only thing I can do is to share some of the burden on her shoulders with me. Although she doesn't like it, she doesn't like my dominance, but she is afraid of me, and because she is afraid of me, she listens to me well. If this is the case, then be afraid. As a woman, she fought with the queen, the prince, Chen Huaiyu, and her fake sister. I was like this before. I fought alone and crushed a group of people to death before I crawled out of the wolf's den. At that time, I thought it was as easy as moving my fingers. But now, I am afraid that she will die of exhaustion. It doesn't matter if she hates me, because no one in this world likes me anyway. I just want her to live a happier life, and I want her smile to always be bright. Then, on that day, she ran so hard that she almost died, just to tell me that Xia Shou must be careful. But I frowned and scolded her. I am really sick. I hate it. Why don't I have a mouth like Chen Huaiyu? I can make her happy with just a few words. I'd rather not have this useless tongue of mine. In the 4th year that I chased Luo Yufu, I successfully scared her into soliting. On the wedding day, I hosted a banquet for the whole city and welcomed her home with great ceremony. On the wedding night, she trembled under me, so cute and delicate, and made me want to bully her. Come on, you beast. Now you are so happy. She scolded me with red eyes. I whispered to her, I told you, I can always find a way to get what I want. I won't tell her how many incense sticks I burned for the Buddha for her. I have to go again tomorrow and ask the Bodhisattva to give me a little wolf cub to tease her.